Hello everybody, here I am again to talk about some of the movies that I saw last month. We have a baker's dozen to get through this time, so I will try not to dwell too long on any one movie. First up is 1955's The Colditz Story, a World War II Allied POW camp movie based on a true story, or rather a composite of true stories, about British, French, Dutch, and Polish soldiers trying to escape. They try every means to hoodwink the Germans and break free from their castle prison, sometimes collaborating with each other, sometimes being stubbornly independent. The movie has an awesome setting, very imposing, good atmosphere, which is not something that comes up every time I describe a war movie, some great black and white photography, and very good acting, led by John Mills, who is always good, and Eric Portman. I'd never heard of it before, and I don't think it's a tremendously well-known movie these days, but I found it very engaging. The second movie is one that came out just last year, The Mountain Between Us, which stars Idris Elba and Kate Winslet as a surgeon and a journalist, respectively, who meet in an airport and pool their resources to charter a small plane across the mountains, and then end up stranded together in those mountains when the plane goes down, after a particularly harrowing plane crash sequence. I have kind of a thing for stories about people struggling to survive in snowy mountains. I don't know where it comes from, I can't really explain it, but I do. So when I first saw the teaser for this movie, I was very excited. My enthusiasm did wane when I learned that this was actually a romance, and so I put off seeing it for a few more months than I'd originally intended. Not that I'm opposed to romantic movies, but it's not what I was looking for. However, having seen it, I think it does a sufficient job of maintaining a balance between developing a relationship and showing the struggle and desperation of survival. I was definitely more into the mountain survival stuff than the romance for a good deal of it, but by the end, I was hoping for a happy resolution for these two characters who'd been through so much together, and while the movie moves a little slowly at times, that frigid and pristine mountain scenery is lovely. Our third movie also came out last year, Going in Style, in which Michael Caine, Morgan Freeman, and Alan Arkin, three of the most popular elderly men still acting, play three friends who decide to rob a bank in order to improve their financial difficulties. This was a very funny old man heist movie, one of the funniest newer movies I've seen in a while. The three leads have great chemistry together. I had actually seen a promotional video that the three of them did together, and on the strength of that alone, I think I decided to watch the movie. My favorite of the three, though, as I'd predicted when I first saw the trailer, was Alan Arkin. My mom and I both agree that Alan Arkin is pretty wonderful in everything he does. There are also a few brief appearances from Christopher Lloyd, which are hilarious, and I know this movie's a remake, and remakes usually aren't as good as the original, but in this case, I've never seen the original, and I don't really know anything about it, and I thought this one did just fine. Now, movie number 4 is one that I have mixed feelings about, and I hesitate to even bring it up because there are some who consider it a masterpiece and one of the best films ever made. It's a French film from 1970 called Le Boucher, or The Butcher. This movie was favorably described by the narrator of A.J. Finn's The Woman in the Window as a film that Alfred Hitchcock wished he had made. Now you know why I had to check it out. Its premise is intriguing. A reserved schoolmistress tentatively begins an unusual friendship with the local butcher, while in the background of the small community, authorities hunt for a serial killer. Clearly there are themes present that are very Hitchcockian, and the movie does have a couple very good sequences that I greatly enjoyed. One in which blood from the most recent victim slowly drips down onto a little girl's sweater and her sandwich, leading to the body's discovery, and the other a tense sequence in which the schoolmistress rushes around the school, locking the doors in a panic. These were probably the two most suspenseful and most active scenes in the whole movie, and maybe that's why they were the ones that stood out to me. As for the rest, I had a hard time getting into it. I think part of it is the acting style, which my mom describes as trance-like. Characters' reactions aren't what you would expect. There's a pervasive sense of detachment. The pace is very slow and sedate. I just had trouble embracing the feel of the whole thing. So while I liked the premise and the themes of suspicion and paranoia in a small community, I felt like there was something missing. Movie number 5 is another love story, The Lake House, a 2006 romantic drama with a touch of magical realism, in which Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock play two people whose paths cross, though they're living 2 years apart. This was a nice romantic movie, especially good for fans of the dying art of letter writing, and it's also a reunion for Reeves and Bullock, who made a really good team in 1994's Speed, a movie which I've seen several times. How exactly these two characters are able to be in the same place at the same time, yet in different times, is never explained. You just have to accept it and move on. I say that, and yet I did give myself a bit of a headache trying to follow how the two timelines worked. Really, it's better if you just don't think about it too much. I was aware of this movie when it came out, but for some reason I never wanted to see it because I had the impression it was a tragic romance. Fortunately, to my relief, it wasn't. Movie number 6 is another one that I had mixed feelings about, but I am not so worried about incurring the wrath of cinema buffs with this one. It's a scary movie from 1999 titled The Fourth Floor, starring Juliette Lewis as a young woman who moves into her deceased aunt's apartment, only to find that there's something freaky going on. And that's kind of an understatement, because seriously, there's not a single normal person in the whole building. Everyone in the whole movie really acts weird and suspicious. There's a twist ending, which I didn't think was so surprising, given how creepy I thought a certain character was all along. I thought everybody was creepy, so in a way, nothing would have surprised me, because anything was possible. I didn't love the movie, but it was effective. It had some good spooks and engrossing twists and turns, and I appreciated the subtle effect of the close-ups on the fourth floor apartment peephole. It's very HAL 9000. Movie number 7 is a passable 1954 Western called Garden of Evil, in which a group of unoccupied adventurers, including Gary Cooper and Richard Widmark, agree to join a mysterious, alluring woman, played by Susan Hayward, on a treacherous trip through Indian Territory to rescue a man trapped in a gold mine. I wasn't super into this one. It was entertaining enough, but I didn't care for Susan Hayward's performance or the annoying effect her presence had on the men, who naturally all fell in love with her. I found Richard Widmark's sarcastic, roguish gambler to be the most likable one of the whole lot, which is fine, because we're a pro-Widmark crowd. Movie number 8 is a quick little thriller, only 72 minutes long, called Terror on a Train, in which Glenn Ford plays a war veteran and bomb disposal expert who is called in to find and defuse an unknown number of bombs that have been planted on a British train loaded with mines. The tension runs high as the clock ticks down and Ford struggles to find even one bomb, and there's an interesting little subplot with his character's wife, which plays into the finale nicely. Also, the supporting cast is charmingly British, providing some humor to lighten the mood, not too much, but just enough. Movie number 9 is a Korean war movie. See, I do watch movies about other wars. Sometimes. This one is 1959's Pork Chop Hill, a grim film in which Gregory Peck plays an officer ordered to lead his men in an attempt to reclaim Pork Chop Hill, a mission that seems more impossible as the hours go by, their numbers fall, their ammo dwindles, and reinforcements fail to appear. I thought this one got off to a bit of a rough start. The diplomatic situation seemed a little unclear, at least to this somewhat uninformed observer, and a few attempts at humor between the men faltered. But things improved once the battle got underway. The story tackles a large number of issues, not just the difficult task at hand, but the futility of war, racial tensions, senseless military red tape. It's a solid role for Peck, and there are 2 brief but noteworthy performances from a young Martin Landau and a young Rip Torn. I haven't seen nearly as many Korean War films as I have World War II films, so I don't have a whole lot to compare it to, but I certainly enjoyed this one and would rate it favorably. Speaking of World War II films, movie number 10 is a World War II movie from 1945 called Journey Together, in which Richard Attenborough and Jack Watling play two young men in the Royal Air Force, eager to become pilots and take their shots at the German enemy. The story, or rather these two characters, have their frustrating points. One's a natural as a pilot, but a bad student. The other's diligent, but severely lacking in confidence. The movie shows how their strengths and weaknesses affect their paths as they go through training in the US and Canada, where they're instructed by Edward G. Robinson in a brief but excellent appearance. Robinson's a favorite of mine, and he doesn't disappoint. This movie was made by the RAF. It features a large number of actual RAF men, plus some Canadian and American servicemen, in supporting and extra roles. I'm not sure how well known this movie is, but it's available to watch on Amazon Prime, as long as you don't mind some bizarre audio. Movie number 11 is Sleep My Love, a 1948 mystery thriller, starring Claudette Colbert as a woman who wakes up on a train in the middle of the night with no recollection of how she got there. Don Amici plays her husband, and Robert Cummings is the nice guy who believes her when no one else will. The movie feels a little long, given that this story is kinda familiar. I won't say which movie it reminded me of, because that would give it away, but there are certain developments and twists that failed to be unexpected. However, I still enjoyed it in spite of a certain predictability. There are some stories that even though you've seen them before, you don't mind watching them get played out again. There were some entertainingly quirky characters. There was a scene with a Chinese wedding, which was interesting. Colbert had some nice evening gowns, and Cummings was incredibly charming. Movie number 12 is the 2016 remake of The Magnificent Seven. I was dead set against this movie as soon as I heard they were making it, but, it wasn't bad. Not as good as the original, of course. Denzel Washington and Chris Pratt are cool, but they're not Yul Brynner and Steve McQueen. This version, which certainly bears the fingerprints of a 21st century interpretation, does feel a little long, especially during the hour-long setup of conflict, characters, and location, and the fight scenes are all very flashy. I think maybe they went overboard with certain gun and arrow sound effects. But once the seven came together, I liked them well enough. There were certain characters that I really enjoyed every time they were on screen, and I ended up enjoying the movie for what it was. And it was a nice touch to play the original Elmer Bernstein theme over the end titles. I'm a sucker for that kind of thing. And the last movie of the month, which I managed to squeeze in right at the end, is a silent one from 1918 called Stella Maris. This is a Mary Pickford movie, my very first Mary Pickford movie to be exact. I'd never heard of it before, but when one of you recommended it, I decided it was high time I saw a movie featuring America's sweetheart, one of the biggest stars of the silent era. And I'm not sure I could have had a better introduction. Pickford plays dual roles here, as Stella Maris, the paralyzed, sheltered girl, and Unity, the awkward, worldly-wise orphan. And I was amazed at the differences between these two characters. If I hadn't known beforehand that they were played by the same actress, I don't think I ever would have guessed. Pickford's acting style is so subtle and natural that she makes both characters appealing and sympathetic, though in entirely different ways and without saying a single word. As Stella, she's lovely. As Unity, she nearly breaks my heart. The supporting actors do a fine job as well. There's a minimum of that affected, over-the-top style you sometimes get in silent movies. I also enjoyed the complexity of the story, which takes some unexpected turns and delves into some surprisingly dark subject matter. While I think the final resolution is a little on the melodramatic side, it suits the era, and what with Pickford's excellent performance and a series of great visual moments that were especially aesthetically pleasing, I'm really grateful that this one was brought to my attention. So that's the list for March. I hope you enjoyed it and perhaps found something new to check out. Go ahead and share any of your own thoughts on any of the movies that I mentioned in the comments below, keeping it spoiler-free, of course, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching!